Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so very much for coming on a rather dreich evening in December to the Liverpool Medical Institute. The institution is probably one of the oldest medical institutions in the world, and one of the criticisms I had was that it was a pale males institution, and nothing could be further from the truth, because in 1892 the representation of women in the institution almost exactly matched the proportion of women in the medical employment in Liverpool, with Lucy Craddock being a member at that time, and she was a member of the institution. And then in 1908, I think there was 8 ladies. Again, nearly every female member of the profession in Liverpool was also a member of the institution. I'm very keen that we make this institution fit for the current century and have our membership representative and include the next generation of young medical students and junior doctors, which is why I'm also so delighted to see the medical students joining us this evening. Thank you very, very much for coming. Dr. Latifa Patel is... do medical students get a clap now for turning up? There was a famous physician that said that the art of teaching medicine was simply to keep the medical students awake. He was the chap that invented bronchoscopy. Dr. Latifa Patel is, first of all, a friend and trusted colleague, and you don't get many of us saying that these days. She's been a fantastic colleague, and I've really enjoyed working with her at Alderhay Children's Hospital, and if you don't believe me, you can ask Kevin Southern, who's sitting in the front row, and he'll confirm that too. Latifa is the representative body chair and equity lead at the British Medical Association. She was elected deputy chair of the representative body in 2019, and she stood as the only woman and junior doctor. And in 2021, whilst on maternity leave, and I think you said you were 3 months pregnant at the time, you stepped up into the role of the chair of the representative body, and was formally elected into that position and confirmed in position in 2022. As such, she's the first woman and ethnic minority member and first junior doctor, that's pretty good 3 hits in once, to hold the post in over 200 years of the British Medical Association's history. Currently a specialist trainee 7, which in old money is a senior registrar. Is that correct? Yes. Senior to us, she's a senior registrar, and she's based between Alderhay and the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, though sadly for us, spending more time in Manchester than we would like. Her primary role is to enable the BMA membership, which is just under 200,000, and her role is to enable that membership to have input into the policies, and that's done through the annual representatives meeting. And there's 633 representatives elected, and she's got to organise them and chair them. So I thought I had a difficult job getting you lot to put your bums on seats. Latifa's got to get 633 people to come into a room and mostly behave themselves. She also has a seat at the World Medical Association Council and the United Kingdom Health Alliance on Climate Change. Her priorities are to improve access and representation within the BMA, particularly for those from minoritised and underrepresented groups. So, ladies and gentlemen, and the one thing I'd say before I hand over to her, for those of you who wish to have a certificate of attendance for CPD, now's your chance to get your phones out, and actually it's your last chance, because I take it down and then it's a different one at the end. So now's your chance to get your phones out and take a picture of that and scan it. So the medical students, you can put this into your portfolios. Kevin, you can put it into your annual appraisal. You're not revalidating. And we typically get 15 to 20 certificates issued each time, so this does appear to work. Are we all done? I think most of the phones are getting put away now. So ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to invite Dr. Latifa Patel to talk to you this evening. Thank you very much.
Entertain yourselves whilst I try and get my PowerPoint up, which I think I remember. Oh, it's actually already this one. Sorry, I thought we were on a different. Interactive. Please talk with me. All right, it gets really boring. I'm just talking into the ether. So talk at me. If you can't hear me in terms of housekeeping, I'm quite small. I'm only 5'1", but I will try and project. If I cut out, wave at me. If your phone goes off, I don't mind, but take it away quietly. From an accessibility point of view, some of the slides aren't very text heavy. Some of them are. I will tell you everything, so you can either concentrate on me, or you can do the reading, or you can do one of both. If I fail in my job of presenting, point and shout at me and say, I don't know what you're talking about. You can ask me questions throughout. I'll be asking you questions. I don't know what I signed up to, and I don't know what I told Callum I was going to deliver on, but I'm just going to tell you things that I think are important. But across the breadth of experience and the people in this room, from medical students all the way to, I assume, some retired members. I know at least 1 or 2 people are retired in this room, so that assumption is correct. And I'm going to be really honest and frank with you and candid, and I hope that's what you need from the BMA, which is a reminder, your trade union and your professional association, regardless of whether or not you're a member. So, and I hope that you can be honest with me. I don't mind being criticised. I'm accountable, so you can openly criticise me, but don't heckle me, because I don't get paid enough for that. Thor, where are you? There you are. So Thor introduced himself to me, and I said, you might find this interesting. For anybody who doesn't watch The Avengers or doesn't know of Stan Lee, you might not get the reference, but this is The Avengers, and every now and then they'll crop up. My title is Saving our NHS. Our National Health Service, not the government's. And my question to you is, who will assemble? So as Callum's already said, this is my role. It means very little to anybody outside the BMA, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it, because I do represent you, regardless of whether or not you're a member, because we are the body that the government talks to when we're talking about you, including retired members. We have a retired members committee, and during the pandemic, for instance, you were utilised when you were needed, and there were ongoing negotiations about that role. Oh, there we go. So to give you an idea, there's 33 slides. There are a couple of handfuls of pictures, but you'll get an idea of how far along we are. If you fall asleep, don't snore. I'm going to talk about you, because that's important. Then I'm going to talk about me, because I'm vain. No, because I want to tell you a little bit more about my journey, as Callum's already said. I'm going to talk about the BMA. I'm going to talk about our NHS. I'm going to talk about the long-term workforce plan, which if you don't know about, you should know about. You should know about it intimately, both from a doctor's perspective and a medical student's perspective, but actually also from a society and a public's perspective, because this is what's about to happen to our NHS, and you should have a say. And then I'm going to talk about culture and discrimination within our NHS, because I am the equality lead and I'm deeply passionate about it. But we also know what happens within our NHS and how staff are treated directly is mirrored in our patient population groups. And that, I know, is incredibly important to us, as the pandemic demonstrated. And I'm going to go back to you. It's not a test, but there's lots of facts and figures, and you might wish to retain some of this, because it's important stuff. Didn't mean to do that. I'm just pressing there you go. Okay, what kind of room have we got? So I know we've got medical students, hands up. Okay, lovely. And I know we've got a few retired members. Be proud, you've done your dues to the NHS. Any consultants? Lovely, fantastic. Any GPs? Fantastic, no role. Lovely, excellent. Any allied health professionals in other roles? Fantastic, what do you do? Pharmacist, thank you very much. My sister's a pharmacist, and of course dentist, yeah, absolutely brilliant. We are one team, and that's important. This is just a joke, but you know, hold yourself proud. We are all part of the NHS. Who here considers themselves an activist? Oh, lovely. Now, I was telling Callum a story, so I've been involved I've been involved in the BMA as an active member. Most of us become passive members in 2000, when you start your medical student years. I became a passive member in 2005 here actually. I'm a Liverpool graduate. When they gave me, what did they give me? They gave me a discount on my stethoscope and I went, that'll do. I'll become an passive member. And it wasn't until 2010 where I became an active member, and I got really annoyed about a couple of things. I wanted to do academia, thanks to Kevin, and there was a real disparity between the different universities about their exposure to academia. NHS bursaries were going away, and I was really angry, and the BMA was the only place I could take anger out. But I became an activist, and a few years ago, I was talking to a consultant colleague, and he talked about activism like it was a negative thing. And I couldn't understand why. Next question, how many of you are advocates? How many of you on a day-to-day basis, or not currently, when you worked in the NHS, were advocates? Advocated for your patients, advocated for your colleagues? Okay, more. If you're not an advocate right now as a medical student, you will become one, and you probably already are without realising. What is the big difference? Apart from publicly doing something and shouting about it. Anybody want to come back at me and say why they'd be proud of being an advocate and not an advocate?
I think, being an activist is that you take up a cause and then, you fight for it. You do not need to have a position. For example, I'm a doctor, I'm a medical advocate for my patients. I fight for their rights on a daily basis. I get them the best treatment, I get them I write letters for them. Whenever they're falling a pit, I pick them up, So that is like health advocate. Well, when we are talking about activism, if something is not going right, I have a voice. I can use it, isn't it? So I just talk.
Yeah. Fair enough. So my challenge to you, did anyone else want to come back on the major differences? No? I thought I saw a hand up here. But fundamentally, I would argue that being an advocate and an activist are very similar. It's just how loud you shout and within what organisation. You can disagree if you want. That's absolutely fine. That's what this is about. And if you want, you can come back at your disagreement.
But I think if you're an advocate, you're quite kind of, you're doing your role, and that's fantastic. I think if you're an activist, you're not scared of being vulnerable and being actually punished for what you've done.
But do you not, as doctors, when you advocate, feel that occasionally you do get punished?
Oh, all the time.
Exactly. So is there a difference?
It's degree of scale.
Yeah. But I'd say in terms of how it works out in practicalities, I'd say everyone in this room is an activist, just in a different way. Now we're moving on to the slide about me. This is my two faces. So I grew up in Blackburn, one of the most socioeconomic deprived areas in the country. I was from a single income family. Nobody in my family, extended family, went to university. So I was, widely in participation, but actually I went through a normal scheme. I attended Liverpool Medical School. I met Kevin actually during my intercalation, and that's why I went into paediatric medicine, and that's why I went into respiratory medicine. It just takes one role model to get you there. Obviously, I've met other role models since then, Callum included. I told you when I joined the BMA, I got annoyed, and actually I didn't have a voice because my university wasn't listening to me, so I went ahead and I went to the BMA. That's me at the junior doctor strike in 2015. I'm still a junior doctor. I'm ST7, even though I graduated in 2011, because I chose to take a more scenic route. I was in an NHR academic foundation programme trainee. I was also an academic clinical fellow. I've done a bit of research. I've also worked for the General Medical Council. Not always a good thing, but I was the first junior doctor, so the person not to have a CCT, not to be a GP, not to be a hospital doctor, to be a medical case examiner. If you want to work for the GMC and you want to be a medical case examiner, actually at the forefront of looking at fitness practice cases, you have to have a CCT, you have to be a GP, you have to be a hospital doctor. And I managed to do it as a junior doctor, and I did that primarily because I wanted to know what the deal was and what the background to the case that involved Dr. Hadiza Bawa-Garba was. And that's the kind of person I am. If I can't get answers, I go and find out the answers. That took a year of my life. And then I've always been doing BMA work. As Callum said, I am the first chief officer to look like me in our 200-year history. That's an achievement, but it's also a shame that it took until 2021 for me to be in that position. I had a 3.5-month-old. This was during the pandemic. My husband's an ICU doctor, and I got a phone call and got told my predecessor is stepping down unexpectedly. Do you mind taking on the role? And if you ask anybody that during the pandemic, you should never ask anybody that who's breastfeeding, who has a newborn baby, because we absolutely have no capacity. 24/7, I was just chronically tired. And that's the question that was asked of me, and I said yes. And my husband came home and went, "Why did you say yes? You've not slept in a year." And I thought, I don't know why I said yes. The truth is, I said yes because I know if I didn't, I stood against 6 men. Some of the people in this room will remember that election. I stood against 6 men when I stood for that job. And I know that if I didn't stand up and do that role, it would be detrimental to other people like me, to women, to junior doctors, to people who have the ability to become pregnant, to young parents, to ethnic minorities, to anybody who works differently to the norm. And that is a challenge we need to keep pursuing, because actually our NHS is increasingly feminised, our doctor population is increasingly feminised. 76% of NHS workers of the 1.5 million are actually women. And we don't see that reflection in our leadership. And that's a detriment to us. And everything that I have done in my position within the BMA has borne that in mind. So I know what kind of things I needed to make my life easier. And be able to perform this job, and that's what I'm trying to do for the next generation. So that's my story, and that's how I'm here. I'm one of 4 chief officers, so now I'm going to talk to you about the BMA. Now, this is a medical history organisation, so I thought you'd find some facts interesting. We actually originate from the PMSA, Provincial Medical and Surgical Association, which was founded in July 1932, and that was by Sir Charles Hastings. In 1833, sorry. In 1836, it was renamed the BMA by George Webster. BMA House, which is a Grade 2 listed building, was acquired in 1925. But if anybody's been to BMA House, and if you are a member, you absolutely must go, because northern doctors and northern medical students don't take full advantage of the fact that it's just down the road from Euston. If you go there and you just give them your BMA number, you can use a toilet, you can have a shower, you can use some rest facilities, and it's just a nice little building to tour around. But it was originally built for the Theosophical Society, and you can see that in the infrastructure, but they couldn't afford the upkeep of the building, and that's why it was sold to the BMA. Anyway, that's a bit of history. I am missing a slide. Okay, ignore that NHS slide. Numbers. We represent 195,000 members. That makes us the biggest representative organisation in the entirety of the NHS. No Royal College comes close to us, and a reminder that we represent medical students and doctors across the UK, across the branches of practice, which is fundamentally incredibly important. So when we get challenged that we're not representative, we absolutely are. Callum's already said this, but my role is to allow the BMA to make democratic policy. If you disagree with it, you get involved and you change that policy. That is the honest answer. And under my leadership, what I have tried to do is make it easier and easier for you to get involved. So anyone can stand, anyone can get a position, and it's fully hybrid. You can do it from the comfort of the bedroom. You really can. You can vote, you can speak on motions, you can submit policy, and do that from the comfort of your own home. And I've done that particularly, I'm going to come to you, I've done that particularly because if I wasn't chair of that representative body, I certainly wouldn't be travelling around the country with a little one and this pregnant state. I would be doing it from the comfort of my house. Question?
I just wanted to say that the medical defence organisations, including the MDU of which I was chair, have more than 195,000 members.
But they're not representative. They don't make policy.
I'm just telling you, numerically, that they win.
That's a fair challenge, but in terms of representation, in terms of taking the voices, I mean, you join the Medical Defence Union as a protective measure. You join the BMA for more, not just the trade union aspect, but also the professional association. You also don't get a stake in what your defence union does. You don't get a stake in their policies, you don't get a stake in their shares, you don't get a stake in their motivations. It happens the other way, whereas the BMA you absolutely do. Rob?
What percentage of doctors are members of the BMA?
So there's 330,000 members currently on the GMC registry. But what I will say in terms of member density across the board, we are highest than we've ever been in our entire history. And that says a lot, because at the moment we are going through this little thing called industrial action. And whatever you think of it, that number has increased by about 30,000 in the last 24 to 36 months. 12, between 12 and 36 months. So we must be doing something right. Okay, this is what if you looked at a very broad sheet of what the BMA looks like, this is what it looks like. Right at the top of the organisation are the Chief Officer team. It is myself, I've told you about me already. It is Emma Runswick. Emma Runswick is a psychiatry trainee, and she's the second Chief Officer to be a junior doctor, but is the first openly out Chief Officer. I say openly because no doubt it will have happened in the past in our organisation's history. The Chief Officer team is now 50% women, never happened before. The other two members equally important. Phil Banfield, our Chair of Council, is an obstetrician, and Trevor Pickerskill is a neurologist. They're both work in Wales, so it's actually also 50% Wales. It's the most diverse it's ever been. And again, this is important. I know, because when I leave meetings, I get told, oh, I didn't know you could do the role as a pregnant woman. I want to get involved now. We also have a childcare, family-friendly care fund, which means if you have a caring responsibility and you want to take part in a meeting, we will pay for that facility. You can bill us, or we will hold a creche, even if it is just for one child for 1 hour. We will do that, because that's how important it is to us that we have your voice. And that's how important representation is, and that's why I do go on about how diverse our team is. We have a board of directors, which I sit on. We have non-executive directors on there. It's a mixture of both the staffed side and the elected side. We have council, which is our principal executive committee, made up of representatives across the UK. We have the largest number of people sitting for council 2 years ago, and they are voted by you. If you don't take on your democratic vote, it is a loss for your representation. If you don't like the direction we're going in, you vote us on or off. The representative body is what makes policy, and they hold the council and the various committees to account. I chair the representative body. It is my job to make sure policy is democratic and everybody can take part. We also have an audit and risk committee, and we've got a leadership team, a senior leadership team, which is made up of specialised expert staff. We are also supported by several hundred staff members who are experts in their field and who make sure that the elected side are able to do their work and are fully informed when taking on that work. So a little bit about the BMA. Why am I telling you this? As I keep saying, they represent you. If you've ever paid into the organisation, you deserve to know what the BMA is about. Even if you don't pay into it, you have a declaration and a conflict to know about and some interest in the BMA, because right now we're making quite a lot of noise, whether you agree with us or not. Now that NHS slide was meant to be just before this slide. We're on slide 11 now, third way through the talk. Let's talk about the NHS at the moment. Lots of facts and figures coming towards your way. When it comes to the bread and butter of the NHS, and we compare ourselves to other economic countries, other OECD countries in the EU, we fare right at the bottom. If we compare ourselves to someone like Germany, we are miles and miles below them. If you've got a graph of public to doctor ratio, we are second from the bottom. On top of the current 130 to 150,000 unfilled vacancies we have in the NHS, 12,000 which are medical, which are doctors, full-time equivalent, we are actually lacking 46,500 doctors just to get to the same level as those in the middle of that graph. And then they ask, why are you struggling with waiting lists? If you talk about beds, we have 2.4 per 1,000 people. This is second to the bottom. We are right at the bottom. If this was the Premiership, we'd be relegated. We need an extra, and I think it's 25,000 beds in the NHS to get to the top. Not all overnight stays. Some of them are just day cases, but we are so far behind that actually playing catch up with the current waiting list, which is currently 7.1 million, is so difficult for us because of this lack of bread and butter. We know many of our patients are waiting for diagnostics. If we compare ourselves to OECD and EU countries when it comes to CT scanners and MRIs, anybody want to guess where we are? Right at the bottom. We are right at the bottom. So you see, in terms of equipment within the NHS, not really being given the right equipment to firefight what we're supposed to be doing. Do you see those promises? Now, a couple of people in this room have been on that red sofa on BBC Breakfast. I won't embarrass those who have been. But what we see day in, day out from our MPs, from the real turnover of health secretaries we have, is these empty sound bites and promises. It's going to be 5,000, they just pluck them out, don't they? There's going to be 5,000 new GPs in 10 days. There's going to be 10,000 new GPs. That promise that was made to us, that commitment of 6,000 new GPs by 2024, we're actually 1,500 fewer GPs. And I remember when that commitment was made, it was an absolute promise. And for the GPs in the room, I feel for you, I genuinely do.
Can I have a go about doctors? It might seem impressive to look at those numbers, but are the public getting value from the doctors? I went to a surgery this morning as a patient. I'm 85. I stood outside in the rain for 15 minutes before I was allowed in. I didn't see the doctor, but I was the only patient in that waiting room for 30 minutes. Now, when I was a youth, and we used to do GP surgeries, we'd walk into a surgery at 9 o'clock, it would be packed out. We'd finish probably at 12 o'clock, we'd go out and do our, visits, and then we'd come back later to do our sort of evening surgeries. I reckon you're not getting value from your doctors. I don't care what figures you put up, and that matters to the patients.
Okay.
Whatever you say here about doctors, you go out and ask the British public now what they think about doctors, and it really is down there.
Okay, so there's two things I'm going to come back with that, three things I'm going to come back with that, and one of those things is on the next slide. It's as if you read the slides in advance. I'm going to give you some core facts and figures. I did an interview, so on the way, I live in Manchester, I came down the motorway, and halfway down the motorway I stopped off at Burton Wood Services to do an interview with 5 Live, BBC 5 Live. And I wouldn't say they're always on the side of doctors, but every single patient that spoke in that news piece sympathised with the backlog and the pressure that doctors are under currently at the moment. But I will answer your question. I'll answer it on the next page. Is that okay? Now, I saw 2 hands coming up. Can we deal with them on the next page? And I know Rob particularly is a GP that wants to come with this. I've already told you how many vacancies we've got in the NHS. These are unfilled jobs. And, an anecdote I always use, since 2011 when I graduated, I've never worked on a full complement rota. I don't know what a full complement rota works like. I don't know what it looks like. And hold on, I did say no heckling. But I take on your challenge. I did say I would answer your question on the next page. I appreciate your view, and I appreciate and we're all patients. I'm a patient. I'm in and out the NHS at the moment with a baby, advocating for the little life inside me, and I appreciate it's really difficult. But I also appreciate the moral injury and the moral distress that our doctors are seeing, and medical students, because they're not able to deliver the service that they want to. 50% of all new registrants are international medical graduates. 50%, that is a huge number. How do we, and we are entirely dependent on them, how do we remain to keep them in the NHS if this is what they're dealing with, if this is what they're firefighting? Kevin?
Just your comment on rotas is really interesting, because I was a junior doctor in the 1990s. I worked on some quite arduous rotas, but we were always fully complemented. There were really arduous rotas, but there were never gaps. Occasionally there was gaps and somebody became fully booked, but we were fully recruited.
There is a real change. It's about expectation and autonomy. To be told you have no autonomy over your own social fit time, because you're going to get pulled into a room at the end of every day and be told someone in this room has to cover. That's not easy. For me to cover, I've got to think about my little one at home, who's going to look after, and I'm also married to a doctor, which isn't a great combination. Not from a social and a love and a family perspective, but actually from a work perspective. What do we do with our daughter who's waiting outside school to be collected? Moving on. Retention is absolutely key. 53% of consultants who we surveyed, and a reminder that, you know, we've got our membership density of consultants is between 80 and 90%, wanted to work fewer PAs. 44% of salaried GPs, which is now the majority of GPs, are likely to leave the NHS for another career. And 43% across the board want to retire early. You can argue and say every single one of these doctors is wrong, or you can choose to listen to them and say there is a symptomatic issue here that is because of a root cause problem caused by this government. And you can do either. I'm not here to convince you either way. So I told you our backlog was 7.7 million. Actually, it was announced only today by the government. That's gone down to 7.71 million. Way! It was 7.77 million. It's gone down to 7.71 million. The number of patients waiting 18 weeks for appointments is exceeding 3 million. And that's almost 400,000 patients waiting over a year. Now, I want to talk to you about outpatient reviews in secondary care and primary care. Between 2020 and 2022, there were 31.39 million fewer outpatient appointments. Don't know if anybody remembers what happened between 2020 and 2022, but I don't think any of us will ever forget that. GPs actually, in August 2023 compared to 2029, delivered 6 million extra appointments. So those GPs that the Daily Mail says are oh so lazy and aren't working are delivering more appointments than they've ever delivered in history. They're just doing it in a different manner, and I think that needs recognised. And they're doing it with far fewer GPs equivalent compared to public and patients than they've ever done it before. So again, you can choose to accept the figures in front of you, or you can choose to ignore the help and the crisis that general practice is going through. I would argue again, we are all patients at some point in our life, and we all have loved ones in the NHS. Clinical time wasted on the burden of that backlog. A tremendous amount of time that GPs spend reassuring patients that that secondary care appointment is waiting for them. And those patients, those 7.17 million who are waiting on that waiting list, and who are waiting years in some instances, who is looking after them in the meantime? I'll tell you who's looking after me, my GP. Between my hospital appointments, it's my GP. My GP is the one that I can call at 4:30 and get an appointment at 5 or a phone call. Oh yeah, this is one of the marvel anecdotes. There was an idea to bring together a group of remarkable people to see if we could become something more. Things like that were said during the pandemic, weren't there? When we were heroes. How many of you feel like we are treated like heroes now? NHS long-term workforce plan. Who's read it? Show of hands? All right. How many pages is it?
250.
Wrong. But said with such confidence, I love it. That's the kind of thing I would have said as your integrating medical student. Anybody else? 151. I know because I speed read it when I was doing Any Questions on BBC Radio 4 the day it was released, and I speed read it on the way to London on the train. If you haven't read it, you need to, because if you have a career in the NHS and you intend on staying in the NHS, it's about you. This is your story. This is a story about what is going to happen around you. And if you are not working in the NHS at the moment, but you're a patient, you need to read this, because this is about the treatment you get. And I'm really sorry I didn't catch your name, but if you are unhappy with the service you're receiving right now, you need to ask yourself, will it be better if this becomes the plan of the NHS for the future? Exactly. No, absolutely. And I'm going to tell you why.
Well,
now,
do you work at night? Do you work at weekends?
Yes.
Yeah. Not many GPs do that, do they?
I don't. Again, without this turning into an accusation, we've got a GP at the front. I'm going to take your question.
Yes, okay.
Rob.
Well, I'm listening. Yeah.
Okay, Rob, come on in. You're a GP.
I'm a GP, and GPs do work 7 days a week. So you've got an out-of-hours service that provides cover for GPs who are working during the daytime. And the out-of-hours service covers from 6:30 at night to 8 in the morning, Monday to Friday, and on Saturdays, and on Sundays, and on bank holidays. So there are GPs who are working for, throughout the whole 7 days.
It's certainly in my part of the world.
Well,
I mean, if you get a 93-year-old lady who's one of my neighbours who happened to have a chest infection, she rings up and because the doctor thought it wasn't appropriate for a consultation, a Zoom consultation, she asked the patient, 93, to drive to the surgery to be seen. That's the standard that you're dealing at the moment.
Okay, so for every anecdote, I will bring the lady at the front end, but before I do, we can have anecdotes. I can also say I've had a tremendous experience. I went through 111 for my daughter multiple times, and I got an appointment within an hour, seen by a GP in a hospital, out of our service, and the service was second to none. So we can argue anecdotes, or we can look at.
You get your information, but you come and talk in my neck of the woods, and you'll find a very different.
Challenge accepted. Rob, you're going home with this chap, you're going to see his neck of the woods and sort it out. But what I can say is this is not about anecdotes, this is not about one-on-one stories, this is about the collective picture, and I have shown you the true facts. This data comes directly from the NHS.
You're not talking about people,
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the lady in the front, I'm going to bring Kevin, and I'm going to carry on telling you about the long-term workforce plan, because that is actually really important. Go on.
Hi, hello everyone, I'm Latifa Patel, a consultant psychiatrist and old age psychiatrist. I wouldn't like to take sides, but I think I'm going to take sides now about my GP colleagues' point of view, how they are struggling, what is the type of burnout that they are going through, how many patients that they have to see, how much technology that they have to, embrace, IMIS and then, Cerner, for example, in this area, IMIS is universal. The time that they can spend with the patient is becoming less and less and less, and then the admin burden, like Dr. Patel has shown, 20% is going in looking after the admin burden of the backlog. But I want to come and compare the admin work that is required in the day-to-day clinical work. They go home, they do admin work. They want to sleep, they're doing the admin work. They want to take annual leave, they're doing the admin work. It is difficult. I do understand that, from the patient's perspective, what are the individual grievances that they're having at the service that the GPs are running, but we do have to look at the population growth in this country and the comparison of how many GPs are there to serve the 1,000 people. So I think these numbers are changing. In olden days, when my GP colleagues worked, they could see a patient in 5 minutes and they write 2 sentences and they write the prescription that stands in the court. Nowadays, they have to do enormous amount of paperwork. There is quite a lot of risk assessments they have to do. There are a lot of templates that they have to complete. So all the work and the time goes into that.
Really well said.
I do feel that they want to see more patients.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're also human. They're also human.
And
burnout, I am supporting a lot of GP colleagues like pastoral support, because I'm a psychiatrist, they come to me, I talk them down, I help them, I counsel them. I think, I'm still not taking anyone's side. I'm talking on behalf of everyone, like all the doctors. This is the same denominator in every problem.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring you to a close. I'm going to bring Kevin in and I'm going to tell you about this really, really important document that I'm very excited about telling you all about. Kevin.
I'm mainly talking to stop you talking about the you talk about anecdotes and you talk about anecdotes, and I respect that. But actually, this is not anecdotes. This is government policy.
Absolutely.
And this is. You won't be surprised to know I come from a very what would have been called a working class family. I have a large family.
Yeah.
In the last 2 months, 3 of my family, a nephew, a sister-in-law, and an aunt, have told me that they're going to go private because you just can't get seen in the NHS. This is a nonsense that is being propagated by our current government. And there is a narrative that is constant that hurts me to the core when they say we should look at the Canadian model, we should look at the French model, we should look at how they run their health service. And you are being pulled into this by going, well, look at what my neighbour, she just couldn't get seen or whatever. We have the most wonderful NHS you could ever have in the world. It is being destroyed in front of our eyes, and we're just sort of sitting around moaning and groaning and not getting. You carry on.
Well, I think you're all just displaying great activism, so thank you for proving my point at the start. But you're absolutely right. Funding the NHS is a political choice. It's a political choice that this particular government have made. I'm going to move on to the long-term workforce plan. If you haven't read it, please do. If you want to know our analysis of the long-term workforce plan, read this document. It's only a couple of pages long, but it tells you the core facts behind the long-term workforce plan. The BMA has been lobbying for a long-term workforce plan since 2008. Genuinely, and I've been doing that personally as the workforce lead, knocking on that door saying, is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? I was really excited about it. Genuinely, I wanted to enjoy it and I wanted to love it and I wanted to see it have the answers for the future of the NHS. Me being disappointed is an understatement. They talk about, and these are just some of the highlights, they talk about doubling the number of medical school places. At the moment it sits at about 7,500 to 8,000. That would be 15,000 medical students a year. Do you know how long that's funded for? This is a 35-year plan. It's funded for 5 years. That's it. No funding after that. If you have and you equip a plan with no money, it is a dream. It is a wish list. It's like me promising my daughter presents every day for 35 years, but saying I can only afford it for 5. She's not going to get any after the first 5 years, is she? I wouldn't do that though, because you shouldn't lie to your children. How many here are in medical school? Do you think your medical school is worth it? You can say that. I know you're at Liverpool. Do you think you're getting your £9 worth? Yeah. Do you struggle with do you struggle with clinical access in hospital with that supervision? Do you think there's enough accommodation? Do you think there are enough medical academics? Right. We know for a fact. Go on, come in.
I was just going to say, our medical schools all online. Yeah. All of our lectures are online.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that. I do medical school lectures online, actually. I used to do them for Liverpool for quite some time. There is a reason for that. We are under-resourced. We have a lack of medical academics. We have a lack of infrastructure, buildings. We have a lack of clinical time. We don't have this for the 7,500 medical students entering medical school every year at the moment. We've asked NHS England, we've asked the government, we've asked the Department of Health for this plan that's going to deliver double the number of medical students every year for the next 35 years. They don't have it. They can't provide us with it, but it's an empty promise that they've made. Pay terms and conditions. Do you think they're fair? Does anybody think they go home with a surplus of money right now? No. Simple anecdote from me, childcare for my daughter on a night shift or a weekend shift is more than I make per hour. It's a bit ironic, isn't it? So I'd be paying more than my wage to pay for childcare for my daughter, and that's the honesty of today. There is a commitment to increase the number of medical associate professionals in the NHS by 10,000, and that is exponentially rising at a very, very quick rate. If you ask your patient, and I'll ask the patient, the gentleman at the back, who do you want to see when you go to the NHS? Do you want to see a medical association professional, or do you want to see a doctor?
I want to see a proper doctor now.
Absolutely.
But, you know, where do you get the proper doctors from? And that's experience. You're talking constantly about numbers. If you want a proper doctor, you have to have that experience on a day-to-day basis, which you're not getting.
Absolutely, but here is the answer to what I'm going to give you. It's retention. Yeah. There are schemes at the moment to increase the number of medical degree apprenticeships, which apparently is another silver lining and a golden answer. These are pilot schemes. There is no evidence behind them. The government doesn't have a plan for what it's going to do if medical associate professionals fail, or if medical degree apprenticeships fail to deliver. What's going to happen then to the future? What's going to happen to these individuals, firstly? But what's going to happen to the gentleman in the back who wants to see that doctor when those doctors aren't there? Do you know what the long-term workforce plan is really thin on? Retention. And we are now, in this point in history, hemorrhaging more doctors than we've ever done before. And post-COVID, we've seen that number rise exponentially. And again, we talk to our members continuously. We know this from a trade union and professional association perspective. We are losing doctors. This plan is really thin on the ground on how we retain that workforce. We've got a big sieve, and the long-term workforce plan thinks, forget the holes, just keep putting water in at the top. And that apparently is a foolproof plan. Anybody of you agree with that? No. Oh, go on, Rob agrees with it.
Of course one's got to agree with it because it's come from the government.
Absolutely.
And it's been sold in a way. The bad news is that even Labour thinks it's a wonderful.
Yeah, so
therefore we're sunk.
That was a good word. I was going to use another word, but yeah, we are absolutely sunk. That final statement, which is something we do appreciate coming from the long-term workforce plan, is that if we continue the way we are going, we're going to have a gap in the next 35 years of between 260 and 360,000 people. 360,000 workforce within the NHS. That is the size of Derby. That is huge.
Derby's not huge, to be fair.
But people-wise, there's quite a lot of people there. That gap is huge. I'm telling you right now, we have 130,000 unfilled vacancies. That is only going to get worse, and our current government do not have a plan to fix it. And if it's not your priority as someone who works in the NHS, and it's not in your interest, it should certainly be in your interest as a member of the public. If we're not coping now, how are we going to cope in the decades to come? I'm sorry to be so doom and gloom. That's a long-term workforce plan. It's a full read of 151 pages. But if you get bored, look at the infographics, look at the detail, look at the King's Fund, and look at the BMA, look at our analysis of it and how deliverable it is. I am the equality leader, and I want to talk about culture and discrimination within our NHS, because I often get asked, what is it about the NHS? Why are people so, why aren't you happy? It's the culture. Doctors aren't listened to. I get that general feeling. Do anybody here feel like they've been listened to in the NHS? By management, by people in places of power, by NHS England, by NHS employers, by the Department of Health, by the government. I always get told when I go to meetings, you're very negative, Latifa. I think that means you don't agree with me. And I think I don't agree with them because I disagree with what they're saying. But that's the feedback I get. Not I'm going to listen to you. You're very negative. We constantly survey and we do research at the BMA, and some of the reports that I'm intimately involved with and very interested with are our race report, our report into sex and medicine, disability in medicine, and sexual orientation and gender identity in medicine. And I repeat, this is important to me because what happens to the NHS staff is a reflection of what happens to the public. If you're not convinced by that, then think about what happened during the pandemic. Think about how and I was in one of those vulnerable groups. I was actually pregnant during the pandemic, and the narrative I was given about uptake of the COVID vaccine and the way I was treated, I didn't see a midwife for the first 6 months at all. My husband was excluded from all appointments. He made it into the delivery room by that much, all in the name of the COVID pandemic. So I have first-hand experience both as a patient and as a doctor during this. Our race report, which is the most comprehensive study, and had 2,000 responses from our members and the wider workforce. This is the percentage of people of an ethnic minority who experience racism on a regular basis. Just in the last 2 years, 76% of our respondents reported experiencing racism, and 17%, almost 1 in 5, on a regular basis. I want you to put yourselves in that position, going to work on a regular basis experiencing racism, and that's staff. Yeah.
How does that compare to a national audit? Because the NHS is such a microcosm of the nation, with like probably 1 in 70 people employed in the NHS. So why would you, is that similar to what you see in the national audit?
So we haven't done that public survey, and I don't know if our government is interested in that, seeing as they denied racism existed only about a year and a half ago.
I don't think that's true, but okay.
It would be really interesting to know if somebody working in Sainsbury's was exposed to that
absolutely
on a daily basis.
I guess
it's really interesting, but I suspect not, because I think you're quite vulnerable in the health service. I think people feel that they can talk to you in a different way because you're a doctor or a nurse or a physio, and it's really strange, and it bewilders me. Really
I think one of the things we need to remember, and I don't need to say this out loud, you already know this, but the NHS is a unique place where we're put in a position of power over other people's lives. And I think if staff experience this level of racism, we have to question what do patients experience. We have good data on whether it's direct or indirect racism that patients face. We know, for instance, that black women who are pregnant fare the least when it comes to management, have the highest rate of morbidity. We saw that even rise during the pandemic. We know that if you're black, you're least likely to get adequate pain relief in the NHS, and that's mirrored in other healthcare systems, including America. So, again, I'll emphasise it's also important to look at discrimination in staff in the NHS, because if this is what the staff experience, what do our patients experience? And I know for a fact that everybody goes into the NHS day in, day out to do the best job they can deliver. I think I've not met many people who go into work and just want to do the bare minimum and go home. 60% of our respondents said that the experiences that that the racism they'd experienced had a negative impact on their well-being. Someone mentioned at the start when we were having a preamble and just talking that during post-COVID there is a level of moral injury and moral distress that doctors and healthcare staff have felt that hasn't been tackled actually, and hasn't been tackled by the NHS. Impacts include anxiety, depression, impacts on physical health, stress, sleep, anger, frustration, reduced confidence, self-esteem, and I'm sure a learned colleague in psychiatry at the front will be familiar with all of these complaints. It reduces your cognitive ability, actually, doesn't it? If you are the subject of discrimination at work, particularly if you're receiving it day in, day out.
Yeah. We shouldn't forget, of course, that patients actually can be quite racist as well.
Absolutely.
In relation to how they treat us.
Can I come, please? I want to talk about how patients are also represented in terms of race. There was a study done in psychiatry, ASOP study, that has identified that black and minorities are overrepresented in the mental health. And when they are, when you look at the numbers, when they were detained under the Mental Health Act, they are overrepresented. They end up in forensic settings. Yeah, that is about the patients. And then when myself a doctor from ethnic minority, I can say that I'm not trying to make anybody that is born here, local native Britishers, I'm a naturalized Britisher. You have adopted me. I have assimilated, but I have to work a lot and more hard to convince people that I am one of you. Please trust me as a doctor. Of course, when they see my good work, the hard work, commitment, they embrace me, but it do take a lot of time. And I wouldn't expect it because I do not look like you, I do not talk like you, or do not walk like you, but I'm a doctor. And I got those skills. That's what I tell them in the middle of the night when I'm on call. They say, I don't want to see you, I want to see an English doctor. I say, I'll come back after 5 minutes. I go back. You seem to be angry, but look at me like a doctor, not like somebody with a different color. I'm the only one that is available, or else you have to wait until morning to see a doctor. I want to help you. So I just sit with them, a glass of water, cup of tea, to make them talk to me so that I can solve their problem. They are detained under the section 136 of the Mental Health Act. They are caught up in that Royal Liverpool University Hospital 136 suite. It's cold, it's noisy, all the ambulances coming and going. The patient is already disturbed. They're displaying some symptoms of mental health problem. That's why the police detained them. I went there to talk to them. They don't want to talk to me. I have to, beg them, how to say, pamper them, and then, staff tell, oh, she is from here, she trained here. You can talk to her. The local staff, come and refer, they will try to engage the patient and say that, please talk to this lady. She had come all the way from somewhere in the middle of the night to talk to you to solve your problem. And then they talk to me. Yes. Yes, I do get abused, yeah, but that doesn't touch me. I got a very thick skin.
And actually, if you look at, if anybody is interested in this report, if you read that report, you'll find plenty of stories just like that. It shouldn't be that hard to do your job on a day-to-day basis. You shouldn't have to convince your patients that you should be seen by them, but that is what we're hearing. So we've done a lot of work on this front. I constantly call out discrimination. I've had to remind Steve Barclay, our previous Secretary of State, that there is a need for EDI roles in the NHS. He wanted them all to be defunded. That's how much they believe in discrimination in the NHS. I'm constantly lobbying for more to be done. Well, apparently it's not necessary. It's an unneeded investment. But then a lot of things in the NHS, beds, CT scanners, MRI scanners, doctors, are an unnecessary resource according to the government. I do realise, even though the timetable said 9, you all have homes to go to, but we are doing an incredible amount of work. Race recognition of racism is important, because we know this group is also the largest group within the IMG population and in the SAS doctor group. We also know that this group is least likely to raise concerns, most likely to face bullying and harassment, and we all know what happens when doctors don't raise concerns when they should be doing, and they should have that psychological safety to do so. Disability in the profession. Disability is not disclosed because there is a fear of discrimination. And 77% of respondents, and again, the respondents were in their thousands, reported being unfavourably treated or feeling that they were going to be unfavourably treated if they disclose their disability. That is the NHS. That is the caring professional organisation we work within. Some of the cool things I'm trying to do at the moment, I'm personally doing, is trying to lobby our Royal Colleges, all of our Royal Colleges, to recognise that if you have a disability or a neurodisability, that you shouldn't be treated the same way when it comes to postgraduate exams as somebody without one. And I can't believe I'm having to have those discussions, but I am. And that's how far the discrimination, it starts all the way at medical school, I think. And the support that you're afforded at a medical school, if you're lucky enough, is taken away quite quickly once you become a postgraduate doctor, once you become a doctor in training. It's even harder for doctors on contracts outside of the national contracts, so those working in local employed doctor positions and SAS doctors. Sexism in medicine, something dear to me, and again why I had that preamble at the start. 91% of women doctors have experienced sexism in work. If this is not of an interest to you, it needs to be. If anybody in this room hasn't read the harrowing details that came out of the working party of sexual assault in surgery, you need to. This is happening in front of us on a day-to-day basis. We have a highly feminized workforce that is only going to increase. Women are leaving surgery and are leaving medicine because of discrimination. And again, I repeat, if this is how doctors are treated and medical students, what can our patients expect of us? We're doing a lot in this territory. We have a anti-sexism charter that we've had over 100 organisations sign up to, and we're still looking for organisations to sign up to that. If you are a supervisor, you need to know about this. You need to know how to approach people who come to you and raise concerns. At the moment, with discrimination within the NHS, the biggest problem is we don't have a process to manage it. And that's why people get away with it. And when people get away with it, doctors leave. So again, that problem we have of retention is only going to get worse. Sexual orientation and gender identity in the medical profession. 94% of respondents, our colleagues from the LGBTQ community, reported having hearing homophobic or biphobic jokes and banter on a regular basis. I want you to imagine that. Someone talking about you in a derogatory way within an earshot and thinking that's okay. That is absolutely okay for them to do. And then you having to go back into that workplace and think about, and it can apply to any discrimination. It can apply to any discrimination. We also see ageism. We also see gradism with the NHS. So you can choose to ignore it. Again, everything I've said today, you can choose to absolutely ignore it, or you can look at the data, and we are all evidence-based, aren't we? We're all scientists. Or you can look at the data presented in front of you and see that there is a problem with the NHS. I've already talked about this, but if you weren't convinced, then look at how the pandemic was managed, and look at what happened during the pandemic, and look at how PPE was managed during the pandemic. and look at the number of people from an ethnic minority background that died, colleagues that died during the pandemic. 94% of them were from an ethnic minority background across the healthcare service. Equality matters to me because it's important. But actually, if you're not going to do it because it's important to you, do it because of the reasons in front of you. Retention being the number one reason. People are leaving the NHS because of the discrimination they're facing. Diversity of leadership. Doctors being able to reach their full potential. If you ask people to hide their political identity, if you ask people to hide their personalities and their traits and their qualities, you're not getting the whole self within the NHS. Patient safety and patient care. We know that where there is discrimination within staff, that discrimination is filtered and reflected in patient population. Well-being, post-pandemic, our wellbeing services are being utilised more than they've ever been before. The BMA has a wellbeing service. It's the first hit if you type in wellbeing, BMA wellbeing into Google. It's entirely free, not just for members, but actually all medical students and doctors in the UK and their dependents. We are paying for that using membership money because there is no other service within the NHS like that, and it's incredibly important to us. And the spike that we saw during the pandemic hasn't completely come down. So we have factual evidence that doctors and medical students are not in the best place when it comes to well-being, and that needs working on. And efficiency. The more people you have, the more efficient you're going to be, the more you retain, the better you're able to work.
Another narrative.
Yeah.
Another worrying narrative of the government at the moment is that they have invested in a lot of new posts, a lot of people are there, and they're just not working very efficiently. It's really worrying to me, because particularly in my field, that actually you're running clinics and there's lots of people standing around doing them. It's utter bollocks.
I agree. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And actually the 5 Live interview I did today was all of patients saying, we know that doctors want to do the best. We know that they can't under the current system. I'm just going to bring us back to the start. How many of you are advocates? How many think that you might actually be an activist, or after reading the long-term workforce plan might want to become an activist? If you do, there is a place at the BMA for you, even if you're a passive/active member, and just now and then you tell us we're doing things right or we're doing things wrong. As I say, we negotiate on behalf of all of you, whether you like it or not, whether you're a paying member or not. Another nice quote that I like. You could replace that with doctors, can't you? Doctors are made by the path that they choose, not the education they're graced with or the skills they're graced with. Thank you. Any questions? I just like this. I just like this image of screaming into the abyss, because that's often what I feel like when I have discussions with people in power who don't seem to understand. Yeah, question about. Yes, you.
Hi, yeah, awesome. Hi, my name's Reese. I'm a student, a third year medical student. I've got a couple of students here. Myself and James signed up the students IT here because we liked that sort of, we could maybe be a bit more of an activist outside the guild and everything. But something that I've come across recently is I've never really known as a student what to do and how to help. So with all the industrial actions happening, I think I messaged someone like the BMA Instagram or something, or I emailed someone and I was like, what can I actually do? I never got a reply, but I mean, there's a lot of big fish to fry kind of thing. I'm probably a small fish in this instance. But what as students can we actually do in terms of things like industrial action, in terms of things like speaking up against the long-term workforce plan and stuff? Because I don't know where to start.
There's loads you can do, and actually we deliver training entirely free for every member. If you want to get in contact with me, you can find me on Twitter. My DMs are completely open, or you can email me at rbchair, RB is in representative body chair at bma.org.uk. If you just Google me, it'll be the first hit, and my email is on Google. So I couldn't hide if I wanted to. I get loads of people challenging me, and I'm open to that. But actually, we deliver free training if you're a BMA member, and if you're a student, the rate is incredibly cheap. I would say that, but genuinely it is. So we also have letter writing tools for your MP. Really, really simple. You just plug it in, a couple of clicks, and you've written to your MP. And hopefully you'll get a response, because that collective action makes a big difference. And that is why we are where we are. So stay infused. If there's anything I can do to personally help you, I will. Get involved. find out who your MSc Medical Students Committee rep is at Liverpool. Every university in the country, in the whole of UK, has an MSc rep, and they're here to represent you. They will have been voted on. They get voted on every year, around about June. The votes open in May. They close in June. Run for it. Yeah, that's what I say. At the back.
To go to the deficit in medical workforce, I think you said it was 11,000. That sounds a bad figure, and it is. But the public just see us as doctors, but actually we're doctors in all sorts of different things. You've got consultants, you've got juniors, you've got GPs. Within that 11,000, is there an area where there is a real problem filling the gap? And actually, do you actually need to rethink the way we structure how employment in medicine goes? Because currently we have a system which, in a sense, goes back to the inception of the health service. You have people that choose a hospital specialty, and they go through Houseman, and then you differentiate out into your interests, or you go into general practice. Do we need to think about sort of blurring the guidelines so that actually you have people working in hospitals who are not, if you like, career specialists, but they are general physicians who look after patients on, say, orthopaedic wards, because as Chris Evans says, once you become an orthopaedic surgeon, you dispense with your brain.
So that
does the BMA feel that we need to actually think about the way we actually structure medical employment within the health service?
So there are key areas that we struggle with most in retention, general practice being one of them, accident and emergency being another one of them, psychiatry being another one. I think there's one more, but I think those are the top three. So you're right, there are key areas within the NHS that have a higher retention problem, or hemorrhaging more doctors than any other specialty. The long-term workforce plan does address generalism, but it doesn't go far enough because it doesn't talk about how it's going to fund it, and it doesn't talk about training numbers. We have a bottleneck at the moment. Getting through medical school and into an F1 job is a hurdle. In fact, since 2011, there hasn't been a guarantee up until this year just gone, that's over 12 years, that you are guaranteed a job once you leave medical school. I'm going to repeat that. You leave medical school with a medical degree. You cannot work in the NHS without doing F1 and getting provisional registration, and yet in our NHS that gap isn't guaranteed. You could end up as an unemployed medical student, as an unemployed graduated medical student, so you're a doctor, but you're not registered with the GMC. And yet we have a lack of doctors. Make that make sense. It doesn't. So, and that bottleneck gets worse. So we know from the pandemic we have a lack of anaesthetists in this country. And to get over the hurdle of CT3, your SHO years in old money, to registrar, there is a huge bottleneck. Up to 50% in some places, more in others. And you can't get through that hurdle because training numbers for registrar years are capped.
Do you think there is a problem that, in the sense that if you decide to choose a specialty like A&E or whatever, once you're on that treadmill, the only way is up. There isn't a mechanism to sort of say, right, well, I've gone as far as I'd like to go and I can do this, or whatever. You're kind of committed to a path that you can't sort of decide to settle out at a particular level. Because I get the impression one of the problems in A&E is you've got consultants, but it's actually people filling the holes in the rotors at night, what we used to call CAS officers.
So that would be a problem with MTAS. That would be a problem of the new modernising medical careers and the shape that we've turned out. And doctors are choosing to go into the CSER route and end up with postgraduate training going a different way to the training pathways. We are seeing more and more doctors doing that. The GMC is enabling that. I think Callum's about to tell us we need to exit the building. But yeah, you have highlighted the problem there. Rob, and I think
what I was going to say is I think that the government is deliberately, certainly in my field in general practice, trying to ensure that there are fewer GPs. So over the last 5 years, the government has put money into primary care, about 1.6 billion into increasing the workforce, but not the medical workforce. It's anyone other than a doctor. The problem is that you go down and says it's put this money in and it's increasing the workforce, And at the same time, we're having fewer and fewer GPs. We've got GPs who can't get work because government policy is not to fund general practice. And that's the problem. And we've got to find a way of trying to change that narrative.
Absolutely. Were there any more questions? Because I'm getting scared of this shadow here. Who's going to take you off the stage? It's been really nice talking to you. I do welcome challenge, and I fully appreciate that not all 195,000 members will think the same. We do have a high responsibility. If you want to give me feedback, as I said, you type my name into Google, my email address and my Twitter will come up and you can directly message me. We are accountable. But I do think we're doing something right, holding the government to account. And if there's one thing you can do, if you've got 5 minutes, write to your MP, use any of our letter writing tools, because we're in crisis and we need your support. Thank you.
Dr. Patel, not only did you generate one of the biggest turnouts, but also one of the most diverse turnouts, for which I am very grateful. I'd like to call upon Professor Southern, who just wants to make a very short speech of thanks on our behalf. Thank you very much. And you have to get off. Yes, you have to get off. Yes, yeah. You can stand up here.
I became a consultant in 2000, 1st of January. Easy to remember. And at that time, there had recently been a change of government. It had been difficult in the NHS when I was training and in the 80s and 90s, but it was exhilarating. There was investment in the NHS. Some of you will remember that. It was really exhilarating. We felt powered and that we could do things. Then there was a crash, and we all know where we've been in the last 16 years. And I'm really scared at the moment, really scared, because even if there's a change of government and a change of support for the NHS, there's no money anymore. There's really, I mean, we are broke for various reasons. And it saddens me to the core. It absolutely does. I am enormously disappointed that you're not a paediatric respiratory consultant, and you bloody well should be. You're one of the most inspiring young people I've worked with. Scary as hell. Like I would say, what about this to you on an afternoon? The next day it'll be done. Like, give me a chance, Latifa. Give it like, let's. Very, very inspiring young woman. But I'm so glad that you're fighting this fight, and we all need to fight this fight. I personally, although I wasn't allowed to strike because I work for the university, and that's another story, I couldn't vote for a strike. I searched my soul, and I found it very difficult, but I admire everybody who has, and I really support them to the core. And the longer it went on, the more I bloody supported them, because I was getting so angry. I think what got lost was actually the love that we all have for the NHS, and it all became about money, and that was deeply disturbing to me. I think we're in for a big fight, guys, and we need to, thank people like Latifa for taking it on for us. So, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Professor Son. So, ladies and gentlemen, that really concludes the evening. On the screen, for those of you that are visiting for the first time, and particularly for those of you that are visiting for the second, third and fourth time and have not signed up to become members, if you would take a scan of this image, you will find that within a matter of clicks, you can become a member of the NMI. For the medical students within the audience, it is free. For those of you that live more than 10 miles from the front door, I think it will cost you £48 a year, which I think is jolly good value. The institution will only survive if we have members. Otherwise, we just become a rather quaint conference facility. We happen to be a very nice conference facility, and we would love it if the BMA and other organisations were to use us more, and if the medical student societies were to use us more, and the dentists were to use us more. In fact, please use us. Anyway, it is my privilege to close proceedings for 2023. There will be a lecture series for the spring and summer. I've got about 12 people vying for slots to speak to us, but that will be published in the next few weeks, or perhaps in January. But it will be a busy spring and summer. We probably will have 2 lectures a month all the way through the next session, so it's looking like it's going to be quite busy. We will vary the meetings between Wednesdays and Thursdays so that colleagues with fixed clinical commitments can attend, and we will continue to meet for the lectures at 7 o'clock because it turns out that has found favour with the membership rather than the previous early time of a 6 o'clock start when colleagues couldn't get from clinic or practice to us on time. So we'll be continuing with the later meetings. We will be continuing with the free refreshments for the medical students and those of us that quite enjoy that too. Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, can I just ask you to put your hands together one last time for Dr. Patel, and we all wish you a very happy and safe landing with your child. Thank you very much. Thank you. That's all, folks. Okay.